He's founder and CEO of the Carbon Disclosure Project in London. I'm not going to elaborate on his institution as he will do that. So I'd like to hand over to Mr. Dickinson, please.
And how long do you want me to spend? 1 minute, 5 minutes, an hour? How long?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, very good. Okay, well, look, good morning, and I'm very, very pleased to be here today. We have met before on many occasions on panels like this, but normally it's a conference or something, and there's press, and people play kind of parts. We wear these suits even. This is really. I think it's very interesting to wear a suit. Today in the university, I don't have to wear a suit today. I can wear my jeans or something. You don't mind. But it's a game. It's a kind of game, and so that's why I'm wearing a suit, because I'm showing how seriously I take this game. But normally we're together playing this kind of big game. And what's interesting today is to be in an informal environment where I'm sure none of you are going to try and write, go to the newspaper or make some newspaper story about something we say, but we can be very informal and very free in the way we talk, very honest and direct, because I think it's both correct to say we're both very concerned about climate change, and so we need every brain fully focused on the problem of climate change, I think, to help deal with that problem. So, you probably have never heard of my organization, the Carbon Disclosure Project. I'm very impressed if you have heard of it, because we're very small. We are 7 years old, and we are a charitable organization. And please, it's a small group, so if you want to ask a question or something, please just stop me and I will answer your question. But we are a charitable organization, so-called NGO, non-governmental organization. Somebody said to me that an organization that describes itself by what it is not very clever, logical. We are a non-governmental organization. I think we would like to be a governmental organization, so we could say AGO, aspiring to be a governmental organization. But so the Carbon Disclosure Project was formed 7 years ago by myself and some other people, particularly a woman called Tessa Tennant, and she was founded so-called socially responsible investment. Now, sometimes people say sustainable and responsible investment. In 1988, she started a fund in the UK for this kind of investment. And in 1999, I had been looking at climate change, and I was really concerned. I had studied a master's degree, and took some time off work and looked at what politicians were saying, and I was really impressed by a document from the Clinton administration called the Kyoto Protocol and the President's Policies to Address Climate Change. I came across this document about 1998, 99, and it had, of course, the so classic CO2 to temperature correlation over about 150,000 years. And you could see a really strong correlation between the CO2 density in the atmosphere and temperature changes over this long period. And I was thinking, this isn't just like Greenpeace or something. This is the White House saying this is a really serious problem. So then I recognized I was going to work on climate change kind of for the rest of my life, because I think, really the risks are very serious, really very serious. The Earth system is not necessarily linear. In fact, I know an anthropologist, and she looks at the very earliest signs of human population, human civilization, something 10,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. Prior to that, there doesn't seem to have been much in the way of a kind of written culture or organization. Archaeologists are confused why this is, and it's possible that one reason is, perhaps the best explanation, is that the climate is not normally like this. It is not normally calm. The climate is normally pretty wild, fluctuating dramatically. And everything that we call kind of civilization for the last 10, 15,000 years or something is because of an unusual calm period in the climate. And the danger is not so much that we get a little bit warmer or something, but the climate will go back to what it is normally like, which is very kind of quite radical and chaotic. Now, the risk that we knock the climate from the stable state to the chaotic state is so large, I feel I have no option but to work on this problem, you know, and for the rest of my life. I mean, it is like a moral responsibility, I think. So I was actually planning to do something about this. I thought I would do a private sector solution. This was 1999, 2000, dot-com period. So I thought I would start this new company, raise millions of dollars and do something. Maybe buy green electricity or something. But what actually happened was I went to see Tessa Tennant and Anita Roddick to try and get them to join my kind of advisory board to raise money, because these were the days when you raised the money and then you made the business. But Tessa Tennant and I talked, and we came to an interesting conclusion. We said that investors, if they act together, could stop climate change, you know, because you could have even 100 people in this room who, if they acted together, they could stop climate change. Who are these 100 people? They are the chief executives of the 100 largest fund management institutions. Because if they act together, they control 60–70% of all the companies in the world. So this was our idea, and originally we wanted to get investors in the UK to ask corporations in the UK to reduce emissions. But we went to see our first advisor, and this person said, no, it cannot be UK, it must be global. There's no kind of UK anymore, that's finished. So I'm like, okay. And then also someone else said, if, for example, investors instruct a company like RWE to reduce emissions, then if you followed the instructions, you would have to make capital investment, and then maybe your profits would go down, and then your share price would go down, and then the investors would sell the shares in RWE. This doesn't work. You cannot tell someone to do something and then punish them because they do what you say. So carbon disclosure. So our organisation, we retreated to disclosure. So we said, okay, we're not going to get investors, not going to instruct the corporations to make an emissions reduction. They're going to ask for disclosure of data. And we put together a set of questions, quite kind of aggressive questions from investors. Not like market research, you know, but what are your emissions reduction programs? You know, what is your strategy on climate change? What are your greenhouse gas emissions? And then we spent maybe 2 years to get investors to sign these questions. And the first questions went in 2002. 35 investors signed the letter and went to the 500 largest companies in the world in 2002. And some of the first investors were German. So, for example, Allianz, Munich Re were the early ones. We had 35 investors with about $4 trillion US. Seemed like a lot of money. It was a kind of couple of years of UK GDP. About half the companies answered the questions, and then we noticed political support for what we were doing. So, for example, Madeleine Albright chaired our first launch event in New York, and she said, our business is to help investors vote with their money. And she was quoted in Financial Times saying those exact words. And at the time, she was also director of the New York Stock Exchange, so it kind of seemed to mean something. 5 years later, we have expanded a lot. We now write to 2,400 largest companies in the world. We represent 315 investors with about 40 trillion US dollars of assets. Now there's some double counting there, but it's a lot of money. It's about 3 years of US GDP. About 60% of the corporations we ask the questions of respond to the Carbon Disclosure Project. All that data is available on our website. So if you want to know what McDonald's or Disney or RWE greenhouse gas emissions are, you can go to our website, download that information free of charge. Finally, how are we funded? Originally just from foundations, so grants, like from kind of dead people, really. People make a lot of money, they die, they make a foundation, and then they give money to the Carbon Disclosure Project from the grave. But then also, we now receive increasing amounts of funding from investors, and 6 governments fund us, including the US government, French government, UK government, Swedish government, the government of the Netherlands, Australia. And here is our German report from last year with a letter from Chancellor Merkel saying we're doing a good job. So that's the Carbon Disclosure Project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickinson.